Hey everyone, this is Greg, your host of Goddamn Gamecube. Thank you for tuning in to Season 2. All episodes in this season were conducted virtually over the internet because of the coronavirus pandemic, so please excuse any audio glitches or oddities you may hear during these episodes. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back to Goddamn Gamecube, the best goddamn video game podcast there is, featuring your beloved hosts, me and Greg, with our returning guest, Nick Monahan. Say hi, Nick.
Hi, Nick. I'm sorry, that was lame. Hi, how's it going, everybody?
Hey.
And our newcomer but old friend, Derek Tanch. We are taking on the unenviable endeavor of revisiting the Halo series in its entirety, all the main entries, as we've done for other franchises in the past. A series that is pretty close to my heart personally, and as well as our guests. So there's a lot to say. We're going to try to keep it lean, but, no promises. So I just want to thank you all for being a part of this, because this is one of the main reasons why I was interested in starting this podcast. So after this one, I'm going to completely mentally check out and just coast for the rest of the series.
We're just going to coast for the rest of the year.
In this episode, we're going to be focusing on Halo 1, Halo Combat Evolved, as it was subtitled by Microsoft, because they didn't want to put out a game that was just called Halo because they thought it was weird. And we're just going to start from the top here. And I think Nick might actually know a lot more about the development than I did, but I was always fascinated that this game went through several iterations, as most genius games do, before it landed on what it actually is. And it started out as a real-time strategy game, which is crazy.
Yeah, that's true. And Bungie prior to that had done the Marathon series, which were kind of, I guess, more Doom-esque shooters. And then they were doing the RTS, and then I think it was a third-person shooter at one point. What was interesting, and my knowledge on this is far from encyclopedic, but I remember from seeing the old documentaries and things like that the Forerunner architecture that you see was kind of there pretty early, even in the old 1999 or 2000 prototype that was a third-person shooter. You can see Master Chief going down the same kind of spiral room that you end up going down in Silent Cartographer when you're going down to the map room and everything, and it's pretty much the same environment.
What I found really interesting is that the Warthog, which I personally think the vehicles of this series are really part of what makes it so unique, were instrumental in transforming it into what it is, redefining first-person shooters. Because I believe before they had made a normal RTS called Myth. And it's so bizarre because the Bungie of yesteryear is this derpy little 40-person company. And now it's this absolute juggernaut with Destiny and everything like that. And it's transformed so much. It was one of those little garage studios, I think. But yeah, they initially intended it for Mac. I remember there was some kind of backroom deal with Steve Jobs where they beat out Pixar or something, which is fascinating that they were ever in competition. And it was originally intended as an open world, which I thought was interesting because that's kind of what they're trying to do now. We're not going to find out for a while whether it's successful.
Well, there was shades of that in ODST. They explored that a little bit with the nighttime New Mombasa sections, which was really cool.
No, it's fascinating though, because I don't think people really talk enough about how revolutionary this game was at the time. Because for a first-person shooter on a console, you had GoldenEye before it, but you don't really have that. There's so many things that this game pioneered that people don't necessarily associate with it. And I think they should. Because, to get it working on a console to begin with, they had the aim assist, which was, I don't believe, it just feels so much more natural. Because you kind of have some play in other games like GoldenEye or Perfect Dark you have the crosshair kind of moving a little bit more freely, whereas in this game it's kind of just like locked into the camera, and it's like it just feels so much more satisfying for that.
It's somehow it's easier to control too. With GoldenEye or Perfect Dark, it's near impossible to aim manually. You know,
Yeah.
Like you have to, like when you're, you know, the only way to hit your target accurately is to let auto aim do the work for you. But if you're, you know, like when you hold R and you're trying to like get the crosshair at the exact right spot, it's impossible.
Yeah. I know that they spend a good deal of time getting it to work with like the thumbsticks, because that's another thing is the two on the Xbox controller, the two analog sticks, like making those work in tandem was huge. Like that was not done before like this.
I think too, like even I remember other games where we're utilizing, you know, because the PlayStation 2 as well had the twin thumbsticks. But I think it was funny watching video games, like first-person shooters especially, figure out what to do with those and stumble. Because I remember distinctly that the 007 games, especially like Agent Under Fire, the one that came out before Nightfire,
Right.
It wasn't like left stick move and strafe, right stick look. It was like right stick strafe and look up, left stick move. It was janky.
Like
And
bizarre
Halo, I
softball
think, was one of the
controls.
first ones to solidify what stick did what, and it was like, perfect.
Like whatever it was though, it couldn't have been as bad as the Duke Nukem controls for N64, where I think the left thumbstick, like the one thumbstick on the N64 controller would look, and then the C buttons were your movement. So C up made you run forward, and then C left and right made you strafe. So it's basically the opposite of what modern day shooters do now.
Yeah.
Where, you know,
Thankfully, the build engine is a lot more.
Yeah, exactly. So like your left hand's always the one that moves. Your right thumb is always the one that looks.
Yeah.
It's like try playing the original Rainbow Six on the N64. It's the same thing. It's like unplayable.
I forgot that game was on N64. Oh my god. I had a hard enough time playing that on PlayStation. I remember when I first played that on PC, I was like, whoa, this game's possible?
Wait, it functions?
Yeah.
I mean, I think Perfect Dark is still pretty playable. Like a
Perfect
friend
Dark,
Dude,
playable.
I actually played Perfect Dark for the first time in the collection that came out for Xbox One. It's don't worry, it still plays like shit. Like
Really?
Don't worry.
Well,
No, but it's still fun though.
You know, it's still
you
fun, but I just, as soon as you guys were talking about the whole auto aim thing where the cursor has to kind of find its way onto the target, I was like, holy shit, I just played Perfect Dark recently, and that's all I could remember is how strange that
Let's
felt.
do an episode on that sometime. That's
Jesus
a great game.
Christ.
So Greg, are you talking about the HD re-release?
Yeah, the whatever came in the Xbox One with Banjo-Kazooie and
collection?
Banjo-Tooie.
Yeah. So I'm playing through that right now. Actually, I mean, it's
Oh, really?
I think it still holds up.
Yeah.
Just like I think its weakest attribute is the aiming. Like, you know, as long as you let the auto aim do it all for you. But like there are certain moments in the game where you have to try and snipe people, and that is impossible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah, Halo Combat Evolved nailed it.
It also, another thing that I think is really kind of intrinsic to Halo's DNA that is the opposite of games like Perfect Dark or Half-Life is how they only let you have two weapons at once, and grenades have a dedicated button. Very, very pervasive from there on out. It's like it's one of those things where you see movies that were influenced by The Matrix, and then you go back and watch The Matrix, and or like you show The Matrix to someone, and it doesn't leave as much of an impression because they've already seen everything it's influenced, and it's like everywhere. It's just like, I don't know. It's so much more because I mean, Halo isn't really the household name that it once was, so maybe that's why. But
I feel like now that we're older, I tend to forget how influential it was. You know what I mean? Because now I just tend to take shots at it and make fun of it.
Yeah.
Well, because you
as
also just
should.
played it for the first time recently.
Right, which is really,
dedicated.
really funny. Like,
And
I feel
it
like,
was a very formative game for me.
dude, I just think like throughout this whole podcast series, I'm going to have some strange opinions on this franchise because I didn't grow up with it. and I just sort of made it a point.
It's okay.
Well, that's what I'm so excited for.
Dude, me too.
Because you're gonna disrupt the circle jerk.
My first impression of that series is someone's like art in 6th grade in the library is like drawing banshees and shit.
Yeah.
Just like,
Oh, dude, I used to draw the Halo guns all the time.
Well, I mean, it's a good a time as any to bring up the weapon design in this game and how exceptional it is. Because I was reading a lot about how, I think his name is Jamie Griesemer. He's the weapon guy that they had. He was very intimately familiar with like actual weapons, and he was very committed to, like, it can't just look cool. It looks like it has to function. And I think in a bizarre twist of fate, around the same time that he was designing like the assault rifle for Halo 1, the FN 2000 came out in real life and looks very similar.
Yeah.
And it's so straight, because I mean, it's like it's so bizarre to think, like, because at the time you didn't really have, like, you picture like the needler, where as you fire it, you watch the actual needles like deplete on the model of the weapon. Like, that's so sick. Like, number one, who thinks of that? And number two, like, it's amazing that they decided that was worth a detail worth including. Just to
there's
make
all kinds
it
of
feel
little
more
details,
realistic.
and all the animation flourishes. Like when you melee with the needler, Chief uses the needles like front
Yeah,
to
Yeah,
melee
but-
with
so
it.
sick.
And like
Yeah.
when you take out the assault rifle, you can see down by the trigger, he flicks the safety off. Like that's what he's
Oh,
doing
yeah,
when he pulls
yeah.
it
I
out.
never
he
noticed
flicks
that.
the safety off. Yeah,
It's so
you'll see
cool.
you'll see
That-
a little red plunger pop out.
So that's the other thing, the meleeing in this game. How that also had a dedicated button.
Yeah.
Another perfect dark comparison is like, you know, all the weapons, if you guys remember, had like a secondary function. Like you would have to hold B, or I think in the remastered version, you just hit the right bumper, and the pistol will change from, you know, fire to pistol whip. So you had
That's
to
right.
you had to
Yeah.
set it on melee to be in order to do that.
GoldenEye had the sniper rifle. You could do the
And
butt
the-
stroke with the sniper rifle, but it was only that gun.
The other thing too is the melee animations in Halo Combat Evolved are my favorite.
They're incredible.
This is one of the things I was disappointed at Halo 2 by. But I mean, that's obviously we're gonna get to all that later. But the Needler one, you know what? I will keep talking about that actually. So like you mentioned earlier, he melees with the needles, and they take that out in the following games.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was just trying to make the meleeing more fluid across each weapon, which isn't as cool, but I mean, I get where they're coming from. It's just like, it's very cool to see him literally flip the pistol upside down and hit something.
Yes.
That's my favorite animation.
So it's like how does he do it so fast?
The sniper rifle is actually based on a real South African anti-material rifle that is chambered for the same round as in the game, the 14.5 millimeter, which is just like devastating.
Gun.
And so like so like it's like an anti-material rifle. It's meant
Yeah.
technically to just destroy like light vehicles and stuff.
Right.
So when you're like putting a round through like 3 grunts and an elite like all at once, it's like basically.
The guns
And like
feel
they
great.
go so far as to identify the ammunition, so it's like armor piercing, fin stabilized, discarding sabot, and it's like, yeah, that would basically do that.
Yeah,
Like, it's just gonna rip through
They
everything.
all sound great too, and even in the first
Oh,
game,
In the first
Yeah.
game, the best weapon sounds.
it's
Period.
terrific.
I will fight anybody that disagrees.
And I was reading a quote from because they wanted to have some kind of idle animation with the sniper scope, and he's like, "No, you don't do that." It's like you mess with
Whenever
your
a
sniper
game-
scope, you're done.
Whenever they like spin the turret, like the elevation adjustment turret, like 10 clicks, I'm just like, no.
Yeah, I don't know. That's just like it's a nice little. I feel like there was a lot of passion in these early games that are it's hard to replicate if you don't have it. I didn't actually realize, because I'd heard a lot about Halo 2, but I didn't realize how harried the development of this game was because of, number one, we talked a little bit about already how it transformed so much. But I was reading that approximately 90% of the game was made in the 9 months prior to release, which is insane. That's like so many developers fumble that. Like it's like it just wouldn't happen. You really have to have the talent and the direction to get that off the ground.
Do you know
And,
what
like,
the development length for this game was?
It depends, because I think it was like the early prototypes. Nick, you might know more than me, but I think the early prototypes were like 1998,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
something like that.
It was
Yeah.
in development for a long time, but the incarnation we got, I think, was like a year, maybe a year and a half at most before it actually came out.
By the end of, I think, like September 2000, the campaign, nothing had been done on the campaign. So they more or less put that campaign together, and it kind of shows in some places, but I mean, it's still impressive.
Yeah, the back half. I'm sure we'll get to it, but the back half is a little, one level is just the 5th level backwards, but like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of warm up to some of the fascinating stuff about the inspiration, because this, I had a friend who was telling me about like, oh, this is lifted from Aliens, this is lifted from Warhammer, and I agree, but it's like, it's something about it just has this so iconic, memorable, distinct feel about especially the early games. There's something that it's just something I think that they miss out on later on, is that the UNSC, the human faction in these games, is very like, it's just like you're putting the US Marine Corps in space. And it's just like all the vernacular, all the all the procedures, they watched how they move and fight and use that footage to create like the AI's movements. It's very kind of pure in that sense.
Yeah, like the game has its own identity.
And you get that rolling snare drum whenever they show
yeah.
up. And
Where if you compare it to another sci-fi video game that takes place in the future, like what's that Call of Duty game, like Infinite Warfare, or like
I just played that
It just-
recently.
yeah.
That game is good.
really
I like that
'Cause,
campaign a lot.
okay, because this derails the whole point I was going to make, which
I'm
is
sorry. Please.
well, no, I mean, I'm willing to accept the fact that I was wrong. But I was gonna say, like, when I played that game, it all felt just very stock. It just didn't feel.
Yeah, I mean, not to derail this too much, but really quick, I really love like Killzone and like Infinite Warfare. Like, I just like war in space, but like grounded war in space, not like laser guns and like Star Wars and like space fantasy. I like World War in space.
Mhm.
And so, Infinite Warfare was just like Battlestar Galactica meets like The Expanse meets like Call of Duty. And I was like, this is I love this. Like all the fighter jet stuff, and then you hop out and then you go do 10 minutes of attacking an enemy ship, you board it, you blow it up, you get back in your fighter, you shoot. It's great. But like, so I love that kind of stuff, and I love military sci-fi. It's like one of my favorite genres. And so Halo, like under Bungie, was incredible military sci-fi. Like the books were great too.
Oh, yeah.
Like I love this universe.
The Fall of Reach.
Fall of Reach.
Yeah.
Especially.
I tried to read the Flood. I couldn't really do it because they had to add so much to it. Because the thing about the Halo Combat Evolved story is, I always found that game just to be so perfect in its simplicity. Story-wise, there's really not a whole lot going on. Like they didn't really start to go nuts with their lore until Halo 2. So try to read through that book. It was just like, well, Master Chief turned this way and shot that guy. Master Chief turned that way and shot that guy. Yes. So when he put his helmet on, a targeting reticle appeared in the middle of his interface. It's like
the backstory, the stuff that they invented to go around.
Oh, like the B plot of like Alpha Base, like all the ODSTs taking over.
There's that I did have while that game was going on. But to get back to what I was saying, it's just like Space Marines, even at that point, were kind of done like a lot, and they still managed to set themselves apart and make something that was very kind of original. And I was reading, and this is something that I always kind of suspected but didn't know, is that the Covenant designs were kind of influenced by sea creatures, and is that they do have that very curvaceous kind of like submersible shape, and it's like
the ships do, especially, yeah.
Yeah, and some of their
I can see that
armor and stuff, and it's kind of just like, That's not something that you would immediately go to when you think of, like just Martians or Greys or something.
Yeah.
And that's pretty cool.
Well,
And,
and you talk about like setting itself apart too. I mean, you look at Sergeant Johnson, he was just like some random guy, and they were just like, we just need Sergeant Apone from Aliens to be the guy yelling at the Marines at the beginning of Pillar of Autumn. And then he's not even named, I don't think, at all in Halo 1. But then they take this sort of stock character like Barney or like the scientists in Half-Life.
Right.
They take all of those black Marine sergeants you see throughout the game who may die in the middle of the game. And then in Halo 2, all of a sudden, it's Sergeant Johnson, and it's this one guy, and he's like one of the most iconic characters of the franchise.
What I was reading was that the voice actor impressed them so much because he kept improvising, and then they just made everybody laugh. And it's like, it's pretty funny because they were originally going to have him at the end of the game greet you, but they thought that no one would care. Like who cares about a random Marine? And now he's like one of the most popular characters in the entire fucking
That's
franchise.
a litmus test for sociopathy. If you don't try to protect the Marines in Halo, you are a sociopath.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
I always tried, but I mean, on Legendary, I was always unsuccessful.
Until they ran me over with a Warthog or something, then I would kill them all. But
although one of my favorite things is the retconning of his death in the Legendary ending of Halo 1.
Yeah.
In Halo 2. So like they had this sort of throwaway line in the beginning of that game for like anybody who like witnessed the Legendary ending of Halo 1, where they ask Sergeant Johnson, so Johnson, how'd you make it back home in one piece? Sorry, guns, it's classified. Like,
you can
like
forget about that modification to your mate too.
Yeah, it's so self-aware. It's like they know that.
There's no fucking way.
Yeah, there's most of us experiencing that would know they're just being tongue-in-cheek with that. They just they killed him in a way that was impossible to survive, and they decided, fuck it, let's bring him back anyway.
Well, he's also like very just, besides the dude that he's modeled after in Aliens, he's very sort of recognizable as part of Halo. And that's the thing, is that was their design philosophy, is that everything needs to have a simple, distinct color and shape so you can see what it is from far away. And that's something that is often missed, not only as this franchise goes forward, but other developers as well. And that's just like, it's everything. It's like the enemies, the allies, the weapons, the vehicles. It's all just like, that's how you get people to remember shit.
I have played the Anniversary Remaster campaign for Combat Evolved twice in the last like 2 months. The remaster, it is one of the worst remasters I've ever seen, because it ruins the art style of the game. It makes it so that the enemies are not clearly delineated, and worst of all, it fundamentally alters the visuals of like huge sections of the map to the point where you could be like 5 feet to the right of a rock and you're still shooting the rock, and then you switch back to old graphics and the rock is there. And it's like, what the fuck?
Well, you know what it is? Because I'd still rather be looking at that than the original version, which is like, I think at this point, I think that era has aged pretty fucking bad. Just like,
I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you.
Well, no, because the remastered version. So you know how you hit the back button and you can toggle from. Well, you just mentioned it. You toggle from new to old graphics. I think in the remastered version, they dumbed down the old graphics to make them look worse. So the contrast between that and the new ones would look better. Well, I saw a video comparing like the actual original Halo to the representation you get in the remastered version.
Well, do you know why? They're not using the original Xbox version. They're using the Gearbox PC port.
Oh,
is that why? Well, that's
the Gearbox PC port wasn't as good.
Which would explain why if you do like local custom multiplayer in that game, you get access to the flamethrower and the fuel rod cannon.
I was just going to bring up. I was going to ask if any of you guys played both that and the custom edition, which was all the mod support back then, which was crazy. There was
SPV3 is one of the craziest mods. It's not amazing, but it's cool.
I played on Mongooses before they were even part of the main series. That was insane.
What's funny is I can actually have some input here. so just so my Halo history is clear and out in the open, when I was a little kid, like 11 or 12, I played Halo on the PC, and then I played nothing else. So I played a little bit of Custom Edition on the PC when I was a kid, and so I actually I remember very well, like all these quirky things from the PC version you guys are referring to, because I never played it on the original Xbox. And then when the remastered, I just played it again on the Xbox One, and I don't mean it to backtrack, but I don't agree with that at all. That like the new one is way worse. Maybe I'm not as particular. I think it looks totally fine. Like I think it was a necessary upgrade. Like when I press the back button, I'm like, oh yeah, it's the Play-Doh version from the original.
I don't want to derail this too much.
Yeah.
But I think it just fundamentally, first of all, it's way too bright. Like if you shoot an elite, you can't see their shields fucking flare.
That's the one flaw. Right, well, there's more than one flaw, but that's the biggest one.
It fundamentally alters like the art design of a lot of the places, like the mesa that you're on, or like the plateau that you're on in Truth and Reconciliation. You're like in the desert in the original graphics, and there's like broken old dead tree trunks and shit. And then when you go to the new graphics, it's like you're in a jungle, and it's like, well, what the hell is this?
Yeah,
it alters
the
mood completely. And it's like, what the fuck is this? And like everything is just so bright. Like it's when it's pitch dark out in like two betrayals and stuff. It's like it's daytime. I'm like, what is this? I just don't like the busy, bright look of it. I liked how it was much more cold and metal in the old art design.
My take on it is, I appreciate, because the remaster came out right after Halo Reach. So 2011, the anniversary version came out. I did appreciate that they were trying to kind of tie it in with that, because it begins with more or less the same visuals as Reach's ending, which we'll obviously get to. So I appreciate them trying to kind of like interweave it a little bit more closely. But you know what I think is that the engine of this game is just too old, and I think if to really do it justice, they just need to remake it from scratch. And I'll get into this a little bit more as we go along, but that's a good I don't think that this game is like unimpeachable. I think there's a lot that could be fixed in terms of level design, and I think it could really benefit from like a true remake instead of just like another coat of paint.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is old, man. I mean, I just played it, recently, for the first time all the way through, and I'm just like, I'm not gonna knock it, because obviously it's an old first-person shooter. So yeah. I mean, if I'm not gonna like, kind of kill Halo 1 for bad level design or very basic level design, or it being kind of a hallway shooter, because it's kind of that's a shooter of that era. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you can take that as a perspective from somebody who just played it through for the first time.
So you get that from some levels. I mean, what is it? Silent Cartographer. I think it was very innovative in the way that you could approach each objective of that mission from like any angle.
Right.
Yeah. Oh wow, that makes sense.
They really put it all into that one.
Yeah, but I disagree. I think the look of the remastered version is beautiful. I mean, I do agree. Sure, you could turn the brightness down in some areas. But in other levels, I think it really helps. Like the library, like you could see everything so much more clearly, and not to mention they added the arrows on the floor so you don't get lost. There's that.
Yeah.
Think about that level too. I have the very unpopular opinion of enjoying that level. Everyone hates it.
I was sitting here like vibrating, like, am I about to have the hottest take in Halo history?
Oh, so
I
you
don't mind
like
the
it too.
library.
Yeah, I don't mind it.
People, I was literally paid one time by somebody. Like, I mean, I was like 14 or whatever, or something. I was a little younger than that. This is before Halo 2 came out. But like, somebody literally paid me like $10 to beat the library for them because they hated it and they couldn't get past it. And I was like, really? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, okay.
I mean, I don't know if Beppy is going to get into this a little later, but I actually think the Flood is the best part of the game. Personally,
they're one of the best. Yeah.
Yeah. I like Fighting the Covenant better, but I think the execution of the Flood and the mood of that half of the game is really cool.
Go ahead, Beppy.
No, I was just gonna say that I did want to talk about sort of not only the enemy design, but how they tie it so perfectly into the story. In that, number one, this game starts out like perfectly simple, where they don't throw too much at you at once. You're on one ship, you have your captain, you have a small amount of Marines that are just trying to survive, and they basically they give you so much lore with so little. Like, it's very, even if you're not like, you don't really care about the universe, it's very clear like what the power structure of the Covenant is. You got your little like cannon fodder guys, and then some, the jackals, which are kind of the mercenarial kind of specialist troops. The elites are obviously in charge, and the hunters are the tanks. And then when they throw the flood at you, or as my friend lovingly calls them, the potato people, when that happened, I didn't know what the fuck I was looking at. I was like, wait, are they elites? Like, why are their heads like thrown?
Yeah, it took a while to register that they were a new enemy. I'm like, these guys don't look like Covenant, and then it sunk in over time as I progressed through the second half of level 6. I'm like, we have an enemy. That's cool.
Cause they kind of outstay their welcome as the second half of the game unfolds, just by sheer numbers.
But that's kind of the whole point of them, though. The fact that they reproduce so fast, so much.
Well, I know lore-wise, but gameplay-wise, I don't think it's as fun as you can kind of play around with different types of squads of Covenant and stuff like that. Whereas with the Flood, you kind of just have the main ecosystem tree, and
you just because I love the dichotomy though between the two enemies. So with Covenant, like you have the four different aliens. Like you said, grunts are basically cannon fodder. Jackals are all about precision. Elites are basically your equal, and hunters are how would you describe
mini bosses?
Yeah, mini bosses, right? I was gonna describe them as like brutes.
Because the first few times you encounter the hunters, it literally plays like a different music track, and it's like they're the only enemies that come out. So it's like, pay attention to these guys.
Yeah, until you discover their weak point.
Their secret point.
Single pistol shot to the back.
Exactly. I'm glad they got rid of that in the later games. But anyway, so what I was leading up to with that was, when you're fighting the Covenant, there's more strategy involved. But I like when they introduce the Flood, all that pretty much goes out the window, and it's just all about you being on your toes.
Like
yeah, right. Or just being fast enough to react on time. Like that's.
Well, there are some. I mean, something that I wish is that in the last board you see Flood that have active camouflage, which I felt like they could have done more with. But there is also the Flood that have rocket launchers, and they have absolutely no interest in self-preservation. They'll just like up close destroy with a rocket launcher, and it's game over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you gotta pick them out of the crowd.
That's the one example where like you die at like no fault of your own. And I think for the most part,
blame yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah, for the most part, I think the first Halo game is really good with like if you're playing it on Legendary. Like in most situations, if you die, it's your fault. Like you were too careless. There's not as much like bullshit like there is in Halo 2, where if you.
I just wanna bring up that sometimes you can kind of get fucked by the physics engine, which is kind of janky, especially when it comes to vehicles and explosions.
Oh, true. One tap and you're dead.
Yeah, enemy vehicles are something that we didn't really talk about. That is, I mean, they're a challenge in and of themselves with their own strategy and all that. But I think another thing that kind of gets glossed over is how advanced the AI was for this game at the time. Like the way that they, and again, like tying into the lore, like the hierarchical structure, when an elite dies, the grunts scatter. And when you throw a grenade at them or you're about to splatter them with a vehicle, they dodge like very appropriately. Like the grunts kind of just, but the elites are a lot more lithe and they can roll out of the way. And not a lot of games did that at the time. It's very like fluid. And so is your interaction with vehicles. It's very, it's not janky.
And the Marines too, like you'll hear them, and a lot of it is just chatter, but they'll also accurately call out things. They'll say like,
look, a Mark 5.
Like they'll say like, hey, tossing frag, and you'll see them throw a grenade, and it's like, okay, well, good, because the frags in Halo 1 are nukes, so it's good to know when one's going out.
A lot of nice little details too, like when they throw a grenade, there's a little bit of light that comes off it, and you can kind of just it's better than not
such
seeing
great
it
little
all.
visual design flares.
Little quirks.
What doesn't make sense though is that it waits till it hits the ground before it explodes.
Yeah.
That's not how
It's an
works.
impact fuse. It's like really weird.
Maybe that's how they will work in the future.
500 years.
I think those
Yeah.
exist. I should know this because I'm super into weird military shit. I'm pretty sure there is a way to have something set where it's like the fuse starts when it hits something.
Huh.
'Cause that's like how grenade launchers and rockets work. They have a minimum arming distance. It'll detect how far it's gone before it'll arm.
Right.
But
Yeah, I mean, and
cool.
something else about the physics is I didn't actually know this, is that if you crouch at the right time, you can mitigate fall damage and sometimes avoid it entirely. I didn't know that.
I think I've done that by accident. I never knew that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and same thing with crouch jumping. Like it's like a
Crouch
very,
jumping I knew about.
I knew that, but it's a really weird kind of quirk that this game has.
The first thing you need to try in any FPS is crouch jumping to see what it does.
You gotta try it.
You gotta try it.
Yeah, before we get too far, I think I just want to bring up something that is, I think, a huge factor in this game's success, is, of course, the soundtrack. I think it may be one of the best soundtracks in any video game I've ever played, especially in these first two games. I think, like, just going through the soundtrack of the first game, there are so many, like, hummable things, and it's like that's anything. Like, you can have the best soundtrack in the world, like, all this lavish orchestration and everything, but if you can't hum it, like, it's not gonna. This thing's not gonna. You know what I mean? Though? Like, you gotta be able to hum it. You gotta hum those tunes. I can hum all of them.
Dude,
Yeah,
dude, people don't walk out of the venue humming the lights. You know what I mean?
So I think we all, I think what we all have in common is that when we were in high school, we all had the disc of the Halo soundtrack.
Yep.
Am I right
I've still
about
got it. I've got the first game and the second game soundtrack over there.
Yeah, it was like video game music back in the day. Mainly Halo was like all I listened to. Like, a couple bands here and there, but I hate to say that it was a guilty pleasure, but back then you're kind of like insecure about that stuff. That like what you listen to is primarily video game music.
Yeah.
I was open about that shit, and my friends loved it. It was like,
with time, I became that way. But at first,
Well, I mean, the Halo intro is like the most iconic vocal theme in games ever. I don't think there is another one. Like, I mean, dude, Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy can like fuck off when it comes to like vocal stuff. Jarek, I'm not saying the instrumental stuff; it's beautiful. Like, if I think about what is a video game song that I like that is actually sung, it's only this one.
Yeah.
only this one.
Think about a video game song you like that's sung more than this one.
The Sephiroth final boss, One Winged Angel. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. You brought up Final Fantasy.
the main theme. The main
So,
theme, like the opening Gregorian chant and, into the da-da-da-da of this is, like, the reason that I went back to it, because my original exposure to this game was this, like, friend of a friend who lived across the street from one of my best friends, and, like, we went into his house one day and we were hanging out trying to figure out what we were going to do, and he was just playing Halo. I think he was on, like, the second level, and I was like, what is this? Because the only shooters I'd played to that point was a little bit of GoldenEye, Turok, Perfect Dark, and Red Faction. And I wasn't really a shooter guy at that point. I mean, I was also like 10 years old when Halo came out. So I was like, what the hell is this? And then we sat there and we ended up playing it for like a couple hours, and I was like obsessed. And I only had a PlayStation at this point, and I had a PS2. And I was like, I need to get this. And so every time we would see this kid, I'm like, can we go play Halo? And I would just annoy the fuck out of him. I was like, can we go play Halo? And he's like, no, we're not just going to go inside and play Halo. And I'm like, yes, we are, please. And so finally, like Christmas 2002, I think, I got an Xbox and Halo, and I was like, I was hooked. And that main menu theme is just like, it just activates me.
Dude, I was gonna
the
say,
music really pulls you in. And also, I recently figured out, or I learned that the high pitched like vocal yell like midway through the song. That's Marty himself.
It's Marty. Yes.
Yeah.
I never knew that until recently.
Neither did I.
Did you guys read the interview about that? I found some content on that.
Yeah,
I watched a bunch of that interview, and then including when he said that, and then he actually does it in the interview.
Yeah,
and I
we're
was
like,
Yeah.
I
oh my
think
god.
the story is he brought in a singer to do it, but the singer's like, dude, you should just do it. Like, he just went
Yeah,
into the booth and
I remember
yelled it,
that.
and that's the take.
He's not only behind the music, he created a great deal of the story decisions and world building and made a lot of those choices. And he's just a really good musician, and I have no idea. It's one of those things where it's like, I don't know how nobody thought of this before now in terms of making those choices for the main theme, because it's like, you know, military sci-fi, and then you've got a Gregorian chant as the main thing, and it's real when that's not the only exceptional theme of the game.
Oh,
There's just so much.
If I could make only
Yeah, go
one
ahead.
last note about that, if you don't mind, because, you know, you guys are sort of, what's the word? You guys are the Halo aficionados of this ensemble. And when I loaded up the Master Chief Collection after having not played Halo in like 15 years, I remember just letting the screen. I just put the controller down and just listened to it for a while. Like, I never do that. Like, I feel like I haven't done that in years. Like, I just put the controller down and I just let it
Just
sort of.
vibe.
I just sort
Yeah.
of let it come over me for a while before I actually started playing.
Yeah, that shit blew me away the first time I heard it. So
Yep.
in high school.
speaking of blow me away. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I unapologetically
but-
love that song. It's great.
But so when I was in high school and had like no friends, my the one thing I would do to like get attention from people is like play the Halo theme on the piano. I would annoy the fuck out of all the band teachers in the adjacent like office rooms, but I would sneak away to the practice rooms like during lunch, would play the Halo theme, and then people would always come in and be like, "Oh my god, that's so cool." I would do it like 5 times a day though. And like, so there were the people who were like in that vicinity who would hear me do it all the time. And then like, then a few years later would tell the tale of how, all right, Derek over here, you played that Halo theme for a whole year.
Yeah.
I'd sit there like, oh god, I'm sorry.
Well, now
Dude,
you're getting like
not that man anymore.
Bathrooms like saying it like in for TikToks or something. You've seen a lot of
I
those
saw that.
videos come up.
Yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, no, I just love it. It's a huge part of why, because I personally am not a huge FPS guy, but I am about this series, and that is one of the reasons why it stuck with me so long.
Mhm.
All right, so I just want to like, because we're leaning into the back half here. I want to kind of just go through some of our campaign and story highlights, just sort of top to bottom. Is there anything that jumps out to you? I mean, like the first couple levels are just so exceedingly well paced.
Mhm.
You're really like that kind of Star Wars, just throwing you right into the action in the beginning. Just, you know, it tells you everything you need to know. You know, I just really like the beginning of this game, and then they kind of give you a more open world to explore as soon as you land on Halo. I just think it's a really well executed opening.
The way it parses out the gameplay mechanics and everything, and like integrates it into the tutorial, but it's like they integrate it to Chief waking up from sleep, and then so you're running around and you're doing all this stuff, and okay, your suit checks out, and then it's like, oh, we need you, you know, you have to go see the captain. We can't give you weapons. Sorry.
Look
so you're
up,
running
look
away
down.
from all the people shooting at you, and
Yeah.
I don't keep it loaded, son. And it's like, why?
It's so bizarre because you get a clip like 2 seconds later.
Yeah, it's like
so-
he just pulls out a magazine, and it's like, okay, well, whatever.
All right.
It was just
No,
one
yeah,
on the
and
floor in the hallway, apparently.
Yeah, just on the ground.
Yeah.
Then you get right after
What a-
that, like you kill those grunts, you get the assault rifle, and then you meet the Covenant. You can pick up their weapons and experiment, and through that you probably find out, okay, plasma's better against shields, bullets are better against flesh. Okay, and then late in the level you get the grenades. You find an overshield if you go inside the boarding pod. So it's like you're learning a lot of stuff about the enemy dynamics, the weapon sandbox, and just how this game is going to work. And then you land on Halo, and you can find a sniper rifle. It's more open world. You get your first exposure to vehicles because you get the Warthog. Fucking
Yeah, you
iconic.
get so much freedom with that.
All that.
Okay. And you could do the three rescue parts
In any
in
order.
any order you want.
Yeah.
Yep. But the second level does have that line that everyone loves. This cave
Is that a natural formation?
Yeah. Someone's built it, so it must lead somewhere.
I think they're aware of that, right? Because it was originally, they just had the line. It was originally like a more natural looking cave, and then they just made it a tunnel and didn't change the line. It's kind of like how Cortana has lines that are like distinctly British because she was supposed to have a British accent.
Yeah.
Like I watch you toady about with him and sod off.
I was gonna say that. She tells.
I never thought of that.
Sod off. Yeah.
So I mean, it makes sense. I didn't know she's also the doomed lifeboat pilot. He's with the southern accent.
Oh,
He's the same
yeah,
voice actor.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
I think that's something else because there's not many characters in this game. We already talked about Sergeant Johnson. There's only a few characters. She and Steve Downs have been in it since the beginning. They're still going. Steve Downs is such a fast because he's I think even before this, he was just kind of a DJ that had a pretty iconic voice, and someone just got him for this part, and it's such an atypical choice for the hero of a franchise like this, because I listened to in the first demo he has like a robot voice and it's really funny.
I remember that.
He doesn't have like a generic like space marine voice. It's just, it sounds like a middle-aged man, but cool. I don't know how to
Cold and
describe
hard.
it. It's so strange. I don't think I've ever heard anyone who has an even similar voice.
And he has like 70 seconds of total dialogue in that game. Like
Really?
if you watch a compilation on YouTube of like all of his audio, it's like just 70 seconds. That's it.
Yeah. And
Because you learn so much about his personality and everything. Like the way he delivers lines, even though they're not very emotive, you still get the sense that he's got a bit of mischief in him and all that. And like, the way, like when he crashes the Banshee at the beginning of the Maw and Cortana was like, you meant to do that or whatever.
Yeah,
and
he's
it's
tossing
just
the
like,
grenade up and
he doesn't,
down
it's tossing the grenade and everything. And it's like, he's got a bit of sass to him. But
pretty good for the animations, because I know that it was very, very stiff. Like those are, they put a lot of work to get in those little, like him shaking Captain Key's hand was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And everything. No, but it's I think they're really good. Just because I totally forgot to mention the voice acting. But no, I think the first half of the game is pretty. I do think the assault on the control room is a little long. I think they could have cut some of that, some of the repetitive hallways, even though they do have the arrows pointing you in the right direction. I kind of like that's where you kind of get into the Scorpion and the larger scale battles, where it's like, okay, this game isn't playing around. Like there's a lot
still
going on screen.
That is still my favorite level in the game, despite that. And I agree with you about like it goes on a little too long.
Yeah.
But because it's the only level in the game that has the tank, and
That's right.
It has like such a mix of combat encounters, because you've got close quarters in the little rooms, and then you've got these big open areas where you're fighting with the Marines. Every vehicle in the game is there at some point, except I don't know if I forget if it's a Warthog or not. I think there is.
There is. Yeah.
And you encounter the ghosts. There's banshees. There's wraiths, which you don't get to drive, unfortunately. But so everything in the game is here by this point. You've seen everything except for the flood.
Well, that's
so
kind of they're throwing everything. You understand the Covenant at this point. You've reached the halfway point. We're gonna throw exclusively them at you, everything they got, and test kind of and that's a great facet of game design, is testing what you've learned.
Yep.
And just throwing them at you in weird combinations. So yeah, it succeeds very well at that. And then of course you get the exceptional flood reveal. That's another thing, is that the way that they do that, where you find the guy's helmet camera. I mean, they build the suspense really well before when you descend into that swamp, and you're told, oh, look for the captain. He's looking for a weapons cache, and that's all they say. And you find that one Marine's, I think it's Jenkins, Private Jenkins. You find his helmet cam, and you just watch it unfold from his perspective, and it's horrifying. It's just
Yeah.
so well done.
It was spooky to 11-year-old me or whatever.
Beppy, do you think it was a nod to Resident Evil 1 when you watched that guy's footage on his camera? You remember that? In the
Wait,
original
was that
game
in
on
the
the
original
PlayStation,
game?
that's in the first like 30 seconds. You watch Kenneth's film of him getting eaten.
Oh, maybe.
I think
It
it's
could-
honestly more just aliens, like when they get attacked in the
Well, that
reactor.
too, yeah.
Sure.
But
They-
it could be both. I
Yeah,
don't know.
because I remember that's exactly how that zombie thing starts too. You watch the footage.
Yeah, like you never realize like when you're fighting them how big the infection forms are. Like they're half the
Yeah.
height, if not more, of the Marines in that scene at the end. Like, can you imagine if like you were standing in front of one of those?
Yeah, they're
in real life.
like they have those
It's-
exhibits, those like Halo
Yeah.
exhibits where they have a life-size infection form like replica
Yeah.
or whatever.
It's just so terrifying in concepts. Like the thought of
there's
being infected
shitloads
by
of
one of
them.
those.
Like you forget, Chief in his armor is like 7 feet tall, so like the elites are huge. Elites are like 8 feet tall or something if they stand
Yeah.
up, like with their heads up and everything. But they're like hunched over when they're fighting.
That's
Uh-huh.
like you really know something's wrong when you find they find that one that has its chest torn open on the
Oh,
floor.
yeah.
Like something scrambled the insides.
I like
Real
when the
pretty.
captain comes in.
Friend of
real pretty.
yours?
Yeah.
yeah.
Nah, we just met.
All right, let's get this door open.
Also,
It's like white people in a horror movie.
also, I'm not sure if this is true or not, but in the beginning of that cutscene when they're still in the Pelican and you hear like the rock and roll music and the guy's like, "Why do we have to listen to this old stuff, Sarge? Wasn't that originally going to be Back in Black, but they couldn't get the rights to it?
Paint it black.
Paint it black?
The
Oh,
Rolling
it was gonna be
Stones
painted
song.
black, really? I did
Oh.
not know that.
I was
Would've
close.
fit.
That's
Would've
interesting.
been
Yeah.
interesting. But it's pretty funny. It's like what do
They
we
just had to like make stock rock and roll music,
Yeah.
Did you guys know that you can see?
which I'm sure was easy enough.
You can see like elite combat forms too, like in the distance, like off outside the level, running around,
Yeah, through the
or like
fog.
running away from you as
So
you.
yeah, I have noticed that.
That's really
It's-
cool.
Because like
You
when you
don't-
hear the Covenant fighting, like when you hear like the grunts screaming and like shooting, you can actually see them like leaping away after they've killed them and stuff.
Right, because there's no elites in the beginning of that level. It's all just like the lesser.
all jackals.
Because they've all been mutated.
Yeah. And I believe the grunts and the jackals in the lore, they're just not conducive to being infected or something like that.
Well, yeah, they any organism of sufficient biomass to sustain the
I
blood.
think the grunts
is
get
what
turned
the
into
Halo's target.
explorers. I think they get turned into carrier
Because you
forms.
see
'Cause
their
if you look at their
are very
legs,
No,
similar.
but I thought the carrier forms were just aged combat forms. Like just over
maybe.
time they inflate and then reproduce.
Bit of
real
both,
quick,
bit of both.
because we're on iconic moments, I want to actually go back to Silent Cartographer. That was the demo level for the demo on the PC version.
Yeah.
Was just the entire level. So I got really, really, really into that level before I got the actual game itself.
Right.
And I remember the gold elite that comes out. So remember when you activate the door to the map room and it plays the cutscene where he comes out?
Yeah.
So the gold elite with the sword terrified me for some reason, even though you fight one in Truth and Reconciliation. So like for some reason that guy terrified me.
Yeah.
So I used to, knowing that he was down there, park the Warthog and leave it in there with the Marines in it, so that when I went and opened the door, he would come out and immediately get killed by the Marines.
That's brilliant.
And I would go down there and he'd just be
Right,
dead.
Because yeah, if you try, you can get the warthog in there.
Yes.
It's not easy, but it's doable.
It's like exactly
can
the right
also-
size.
You can also do that level out of order. You can go and unlock the door first, and then go to the main control room, which is
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that when they first show up in the stealth camo and the ship, that was another super memorable moment. You just see these floating swords come out and like kill
Yeah.
everybody. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the stronger moments are in the first half of the game. We talked about the library a little bit. You know, it's not as bad as people say it is. You get the shotgun in the back half of the game. That is awesome.
The shotgun
Shotgun's
is
great.
one of my favorite video game shotguns, and they ruined it in the rest of the franchise. It is
I think the shotgun's okay in 2. At least it has a large like magazine. But after that, you get like nothing.
I was
But
just playing it
it's
last
very,
night.
Very
and I
short
was, like-
range.
I was like, on normal, it took 4 shots at like 10 feet to kill a red elite, and I was like, no, this is stupid.
Yeah.
It would take 2 on like legendary in the first
That
game.
but yeah,
Fuck.
Halo. But like everything about the Halo 1 shotgun, like the reload animation is the best. How
It's so
like
good.
good it is. Yep.
Yeah, well, anyway, you get into the back half of the game. There's a lot of recycle. I mean, I think they did the best they could, considering there were probably huge time constraints. The assault on the control room, they go through backwards at night, which is kind of cool because you fly around in the Banshee. That's where you have that really goofy kind of series of you gotta walk into those generators to blow them up, because I think they intended for you to like place bombs or something, and instead the concession they made was you walk into them and just turn them off, sacrifice
and blast your shields out,
Yeah.
and then sentinels come in or whatever.
It's a cool atmosphere because that's where you see the Covenant and the Flood fighting each other for the first time.
Yeah, Two Betrayals is probably my like third favorite level. I actually really like that one.
It might be my favorite because I'll always like the second half of the game better because I just love the post-apocalyptic atmosphere of it all.
It's very impressive.
Shit.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive they can do that with establishing this is what it normally looks like, and the way that they can contrast kind of you're fighting aliens versus aliens are fighting each other is pretty impressive. Like everything's on fire. You go back to the Truth and Reconciliation, and that's all fucked. That's where Captain Keyes, you gotta punch his face, punch his lights out.
So iconic. So iconic.
I love
You know
have you
what
seen
he
like the
wants to do?
Slipspace Entertainment video where it's like the ceremony in 2, and it's like the Navy has lost one of its best, and Master Chief is standing there, and then it like crossfades to him punching Keyes to get the CNI transponder, and then Miranda's just standing there like at attention, like with a tear running down her face.
Yeah. Well, okay, so here's a question I have for you guys. So speaking of Two Betrayals, what's the other betrayal?
So
I've always wondered that.
Anybody know?
so
You get betrayed by Guilty Spark.
Yeah.
well, so I think it's Guilty Spark, and then
Maybe it's them betraying each other. I don't know. Like I don't know. I've always wondered.
maybe it's like. You know
Maybe
what?
it's
I
the
actually don't know. I've
concept.
never thought about that.
All right.
This is
I
a
just wanted
question
to
that I'm
plant that
going
seed in
to
your heads,
ponder.
just so it bothers you for the rest of your life.
I know.
Yeah.
It's already been bothering me
I may or may not actually be googling
since
this right
8th
now.
grade. Since I
Alright.
first played that game.
So move on so we can get some good audio, and I'll see if I can find this.
All right. Well, I wanted to say, even though the last level is recycled, I love it. It's probably my favorite.
That's for sure my favorite level. I shouldn't have said it was Two Betrayals. Two Betrayals might be my second favorite.
The shot of the going around the desert, showing the Pillar of Autumn as it's in its
Oh, with that
state.
like haunting alternate chant.
So
Yep.
fucking cool.
Oh.
And they really like ratchet up the tension as you gotta blow up the fucking fusion reactors, and we didn't even talk about like the actual story of this game, but it's very simple. Halo's bad. Everybody wants to use it and annihilate all life in the galaxy, and you.
I actually have the Betrayals, which ties into the story a little bit.
All right, let's hear 'em.
So the story, of course, is that the UNSC over here, or Captain Keyes specifically, and Cortana finds out through chatter that Halo is some kind of religious artifact for the Covenant, but also a weapon that they want to supposedly use to wipe out humanity. In actuality, the first betrayal is that Master Chief was lied to about Halo's purpose. And second is that Guilty Spark actually turns on the Chief when Chief finds out that he lied to him. Because
Okay.
Guilty Spark just thinks that he's fulfilling his purpose like a dumb gamer. And then he's like, well, yeah, you didn't know what you were doing? And then Chief is like, no, I didn't, and now we're not going to do it. And then that's when Guilty Spark is like, all right, well, now we're going to kill you.
State's
I
head,
guess.
dispose of the rest.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the first betrayal is the lie. The second is that Guilty Spark is like, oh, you're not going to help me? All right, I guess you're going to die then.
You know what?
So-
I feel you, Chief. I've had 2 betrayals. I've had more than 2 betrayals in my lifetime. I mean, it's the Warthog escape is so much fun. It's so goofy because the
I hate
Warthog
it.
is impossible to drive.
Yeah, I'm like, I always wondered, like, what is the purpose of that range of road you
Dude,
drive?
I hate it. I hate it.
Yeah,
Dude,
it makes.
It's
I
just
mean,
like empty areas of the ship, honestly. I think.
Dude,
where
yeah,
it's
it's
like
so
it's
iconic.
but why is it designed that way? Why is it made to be the most like inconvenient? I don't get it.
Dude, it's so iconic, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. I just fucking hate playing it. Like I
Greg,
don't like it.
Having just played through that game twice, like I said, twice in
Yeah.
like the last few months, I agree with you now.
Yeah.
That is much more frustrating than I remember, because specifically they know that you're going to take jumps to take like a shortcut, and they put carrier forms right at where you're going to land, so you hit them and flip.
That is cool.
This just fuels my theory that they just need to remake it top to bottom. You know what I mean?
I've been playing with Ruby's Rebalanced
I think
campaign mod.
It's perfect the way it is.
Do they change that at all in that version?
Ruby's Rebalanced. So the mod for that, it doesn't change a ton because there's not a lot to change. It just makes little tweaks here and there.
Yeah.
It does change the flood. It makes the weapon. It makes like the assault rifle and the sniper rifle a little more effective against the flood.
Oh yeah, because the sniper rifle doesn't do anything in the normal.
Well, because the
version.
idea is that it's ripping right through them, but it's like, yeah,
Right.
but it should still do something.
Yeah.
But it also makes the carrier forms explode instantaneously instead of like flying away, and it also like
that's
increases
better.
the damage to the infection forms if there's like cook-off, or like if there's multiple. It's like minor things.
Yeah.
But it makes the plasma weapons a little better. I've been running around with the plasma rifle like constantly. I love that thing so much.
What about that mod that someone did, and it's like really weird?
Cursed Halo.
No.
With the reverse pistol.
No.
You shoot
Where
yourself.
it just shoots yourself? No, not that
Yeah.
one. Though, what's it called? SPV or something?
SPV3.
Yeah.
That's gone through many iterations. I've been following it for a while. It's basically just this kitchen sink mod that adds like everything from the later games
It adds, like,
into
brutes and
the
stuff.
campaign. It also adds a bunch of like, it alters the levels. Like when you land on Halo, you have to take out like a bunch of anti-air wraiths, and then like the pelicans drop you supplies and shit, and it's like this huge thing. There's like outposts. It adds the brutes as enemies. It adds like all the different variants of jackals. It's cool, but the kitchen sink approach doesn't do the balance any favors. It's like ball-bustingly hard sometimes on anything above like normal, because it's just like, I've got a focus rifle and I'm gonna burn you to death in like 2 seconds or whatever.
It's less about making a faithful like reimagining and just kind of like fuck it, let's go. Let's just.
I
put
recommend that
everything
mod
in
as a
there.
curiosity. There's a cool
Sure.
zero-G part in Pillar of Autumn where you got to fight 2 hunters, and like
Oh, that's cool.
the artificial gravity gets turned off in your area. That's pretty cool. But
That's what's something that I'm really grateful about all these games coming to PC now, is that modders can really just kind of go ham. Yeah, I kind of just wrapping it up here. I just wanted to talk about some notable cut content. The first thing that pops into mind in the very early builds of the game is the local fauna that are seemingly making a comeback in this new one. I personally, they've tried it in Reach, kind of to middling purpose. But I think that if they invented some extra like hostile fauna, it would kind of give a little bit more variety to the enemy palette. I don't know how you guys feel, but it's like something that I feel is kind of lacking as the series goes on, is good enemies that are fun to fight. So I think that would be a good kind of inclusion. I think they intended for you to ride some of them actually in the original.
I mean, it would make it feel more lived in if everything wasn't just placed there.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Exactly. And some of the only other things that I felt were worth talking about is the Adrenal Enemy, which is clawing its way back into canon, and it's basically this Covenant species that they keep talking about in background, and it's like the be all end all, like toughest thing. It's like gigantic. It's just this.
What is it called?
Bigger, the Adrenal. You hear about that?
Yeah, I have. You showed me a picture of it.
I'm trying to think. The name
it's-
sounds familiar.
I think
Did-
it's
didn't
based
they
on an old like
rename them?
marathon.
Didn't they like rename them?
Maybe.
I'm gonna look this up.
Because everything has its own.
The Sharkwa. They
yeah,
call
yeah,
them now.
yeah.
They renamed
Because-
them the Sharkwa. Yeah, okay.
Because all the Covenant races have their own names and their own languages.
Right.
But they kept going back as far as this game. They trying to put it in this like be all end all, like bigger than Hunter, bigger than anything enemy and it's still elusive. And also the engineers, which show up later. They show up in the books, pretty early, but they show up in ODST for the first time. They were intended for this game. They're kind of a synthetic Covenant species that meant to like repair their vehicles and give them extra shields and stuff like that.
But they're basically slaves.
Yes.
Which is interesting. Like they are peaceful. They're pacifist.
Yeah.
There's actually a model for them too in Combat Evolved.
That's right.
They're not in the game, but I have the strategy guide, the old like Prima Games, whatever, and like on one of the pages. Yeah, on one of the pages they actually have the engineer model for Combat Evolved.
Yeah. Cool to see it. I mean, I was talking to you earlier, Nick, off mic, about how many things in Halo 1 that show up later in the series. Like they were so ambitious, like the Gauss Warthog and the Spectre and stuff like that. So much stuff was planned for this game. I don't know if you guys have anything else to say to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I'm surprised you think they should remake it from the ground up. I don't know if I'd welcome that at all. Just feel like it's just perfect the way it is. I mean, sure. I mean, it's not perfect, but I feel like a remake from the ground up wouldn't, have the same heart that the original did. I don't know. Like playing it now, still the controls are airtight. Gameplay is super fluid.
I'm talking about like if someone like a Blue Point Demon Souls remake quality of Halo 1, like let's go. Like let's just like pedal to the metal.
I'd let them do that.
If it felt enough like the real thing, then
if
sure.
They gave a shit is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah. But no, I still think it holds up very well today. Like I'll be replaying that game till I'm like 80. Yeah. I don't want to say life-changing, but I think it was. Like it was a very defining moment in my youth.
When we do the episode, The Games That Saved Your Life, we'll just have you on. You can talk about that one.
Yeah.
No, I'm not kidding. But when it comes to Halo 1, if we're wrapping this up here, I think just so for full transparency, this is the only Halo game I played until I turned 28 years old. And then I played the rest of them. Yeah. So, and I think it can't be understated, like how influential this game was to everything. Like, I don't want to make a really like reductive comment or whatever, but I mean, when you guys talk about Perfect Dark and other first-person shooters that came before it, I know obviously as time goes by, games get better, but they are so much worse than how Halo plays. It just can't be understated that Halo, like every game had to then be better than Halo. Like Halo became the new standard, and it not only sold, it also sold Xboxes. It was the thing.
Yeah.
Which is, I just feel like when we talk about games like this, I'm not making fun of you guys because you guys are big fans of this franchise. You can get into all the little bits, but I think the most important thing is Halo became the game to beat. It's like if you're going to make a first-person shooter, you have to make it better than this.
Yeah.
And that's my takeaway. Is that.
The Xbox was considered, they weren't sure if it was going to sell, and then Halo was attached to it, and it fucking printed money. Yeah. And I think that's what they were banking on for this new one, and it didn't work out. I believe that the console just came out, right? And I haven't
at the time of this recording, the Xbox launched, yesterday or 2 days ago?
Yeah.
Really?
A couple days ago,
I live under a rock.
Yeah. Do we have any other final thoughts for Halo?
I do.
Nick, yeah, please.
So, yeah, I mean, like the others have said, I told my story earlier. This was a very formative and very iconic game for me as a youth. And, I then obviously followed the lead up and releases of 2, 3, Reach, ODST, all that. And, this series has informed me as a gamer, as a writer, and just in general as a human being. And I think Halo 1, where it falls in the series, it's an incredible start. To me, I think it has the best balance. It has the best sounding and feeling weapons overall. Just like especially the sound design, which we didn't really touch on too much except for the music, but like the sniper rifle, the assault rifle, the pistol, the shotgun, they all sound just so chunky. Yeah. And when you move on to the other games, it just sounds like they recorded it down the hall or something. Like it just sounds like it's further away. And like when you fire the sniper rifle in this, it's like you feel like you're taking somebody's head off with the thing. It's incredible.
Well,
And-
we didn't even not to interrupt. We didn't talk about multiplayer at all because you were talking about balance, and I was just thinking about the pistol.
If you were using the pistol in multiplayer, you basically were wrong. It was like...
Yeah, that's the only thing. And I mean, I think as far as the multiplayer was very popular, but it was limited by you had to really have. There were a lot of like very big maps, and the system link was the only real way to capitalize on them. I think
only
most of
ever
the maps
played
in
it
the first game are
4-player.
great. Yeah,
I only ever played it 4-player. We would just
Me
pass
too.
controllers and stuff.
What's so funny is that my only experience with Halo 1 as a kid was on PC, the full boat.
I
They
did play
didn't-
Custom Edition online on PC, and that was really fun. Blood Gulch forever.
Yeah, dude, my
Man,
only
like-
experience as a kid with Halo was online going crazy with everybody. So that's my contrast.
So, as far as it falls within the rest of the series, like I was saying, this is my probably favorite to go back and play. I would never try to make like an objective declaration that it's the best game, because the other ones do improve upon it in a lot of
very
ways,
high,
but
though.
also regress in a lot of ways. But
Yeah.
this is my favorite one to go back and play, and I have in the last, twice recently. So it's like, it's not nostalgia. I love this fucking game.
In terms of gameplay, I think Halo takes what the older first-person shooters tried to do and perfects it. Like, I think
New age.
Just for fun factor, Halo 1 is the first game I'd ever go back to and just to replay, more so than 2 and 3. It's just so perfect in its simplicity. It's just quality over quantity. I
A
guess.
lot with a little.
Yep.
that 30 seconds of fun. So, all that said, Greg, what can we expect next week?
You mean we're gonna What? You mean we're gonna talk about Halo 2? Is that what you're getting at?
We're
What
gonna
was
talk
that
about
little
what-
wink and nod?
We're going to talk about one of the best games ever made.
Halo
So-
2. So we are gonna wrap Halo 1 for now. And Beppy, what do we like to say on this show?
Can we all get over the goddamn GameCube, please?
Yeah. Thanks, guys.